Abandoned and pregnant, she built her cabin alone until the Apache became her angel and did what no one dared. But what Elena did not know was that her rescue would ignite a jealous rage so violent it would force Takoda to make an impossible choice: honor his sacred promise to his people or become the angel that one desperate soul was praying for. Before we begin this story, tell me in the comments what part of the world you're watching from, and if you've ever been saved by someone who had every reason to walk away but chose to stay anyway. In the unforgiving mountains of New Mexico Territory, 1873, a young girl was about to discover that sometimes the cruelest betrayals come from those closest to us, and the most powerful love comes from the most unexpected places. You're pregnant. Elena Brennan stood in the kitchen of her godparents' house, her hands gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white. At 18 years old, she had lived with Don Ricardo and Donna Mercedes for 4 years, ever since her parents died of fever, leaving her orphaned and alone. Donna Mercedes's voice was cold as winter stone. "How could you do this to us? After everything we've done for you, we took you in, fed you, clothed you, fed you. And this is how you repay our Christian charity?" "Madrina, please," Elena's voice broke. Don't lie to me." Mercedes's hand cracked across Elena's face, sending her stumbling backward. "Whose is it? Which boy from town seduced you? Or did you throw yourself at him?" Elena's hand went to her burning cheek, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to scream the truth, wanted to point at Don Ricardo sitting in his chair by the fire, pretending to read his Bible while this happened, wanted to tell her godmother that there had been no seduction, no willing participation, only force and threats and shame so deep it had silenced her for months. But she couldn't, because she'd tried once before 3 months ago when she'd first realized what was happening to her. She'd gone to Donna Mercedes in tears, tried to explain, and her godmother had slapped her then too, called her a liar, said Don Ricardo was a respectable man who would never touch her inappropriately. "You're jealous," Mercedes had hissed. "Jealous that I have a husband, and you're just an orphan charity case. You'd say anything to cause trouble." After that, Elena had stayed silent, endured, hoped it would stop. But it hadn't stopped. And now there was a baby, undeniable proof growing inside her, and no words that would make anyone believe the truth. "Get out," Mercedes said flatly. "Pack your things. You have 1 hour." "Madrina, please, I have nowhere to go." "You should have thought of that before you disgraced yourself." Mercedes's face was twisted with disgust. "We are a respectable Christian family. We will not have this scandal attached to our name." Don Ricardo finally looked up from his Bible, his eyes meeting Elena's for just a moment. She saw no remorse there, no guilt, only cold satisfaction that she was being removed, the evidence of his sin expelled before it could expose him. "The cabin," he said quietly. "Her parents' old cabin in the mountains. Give her that. At least we can say we didn't leave her with absolutely nothing." It was cruel genius. The cabin was in Apache territory 40 miles from town, abandoned for 4 years and surely in ruins. Giving it to her was the same as killing her, but with the appearance of mercy. Mercedes nodded slowly. "Fine. Take the cabin. Take whatever you can carry. But you leave tonight, and you never come back. If you ever speak our names, if you ever try to connect us to your child, I will make sure everyone knows what you really are." Elena packed with shaking hands. 1 bag, a few clothes, her mother's Bible, the only thing she had from her parents. Some food Mercedes begrudgingly provided, a blanket. It wasn't enough to survive, but it was all she had. As she walked out the door, Don Ricardo's sons, her supposed brothers, watched with cold eyes. They were 17 and 15 and they'd called her sister once. Now they looked at her like she was dirt. The youngest, Miguel, had tears in his eyes. He was only 12, too young to understand the full cruelty of what was happening. "Elena," he started, but his mother cut him off. "Don't speak to her. She's not your sister anymore." Elena walked into the night, 8 months pregnant, with winter approaching and death waiting in the mountains. The town watched her leave. Windows lit up as people peered out, whispering. By morning, everyone would know. The orphan girl who'd gotten herself in trouble. The charity case who'd proven unworthy of the mercy shown her. No one would ask questions. No one would investigate. Don Ricardo's reputation as a respected man was secure. The 40-mile journey to the cabin took Elena 3 days. She walked slowly, her swollen belly making every step agony. She slept in caves, under trees, anywhere she could find shelter. She ate the little food she had, rationing it carefully, knowing it wouldn't be enough. On the 3rd day, she saw the cabin, or what was left of it. The roof had collapsed. The door hung off its hinges. Windows were broken. 4 years of weather and neglect had nearly destroyed it. Elena stood there, staring at the ruins of her last hope, and felt something break inside her. She was 18 years old, pregnant with her abuser's child, alone in Apache territory where she would likely be killed or die of exposure. She had nothing. Was nothing. The family that should have protected her had fed her to the wolves. She fell to her knees in the dirt, hands pressed against her belly where the baby kicked, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she let herself sob. Deep, wrenching sounds that came from a place beyond words. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the baby. "I'm so sorry. I tried. I tried to keep us safe. But I don't know how to do this. I don't know how we survive." The baby kicked again as if answering, as if saying, "We fight, we survive, we don't give up." Elena wiped her tears, looked at the ruined cabin, and made a decision. She would rebuild it. Somehow. She would create shelter before the baby came. She would plant a garden, forage for food, learn to survive in this wilderness. She would not let them win. Would not let Don Ricardo's cruelty define her life. She didn't know that someone was watching from the trees. That an Apache warrior had been tracking her since she entered the territory, curious about the pregnant white girl walking alone toward certain death. She didn't know that Dakota was fighting his own battle, between duty to his tribe and his promise to marry Kiona, the fierce Apache warrior woman who loved him, and something inexplicable pulling him toward this stranger's suffering. She didn't know that in 3 weeks, when her body finally gave out from exhaustion, and she collapsed unconscious while trying to rebuild that cabin, he would have to make the choice that would change both their lives forever. All she knew was that she had to survive today. Tomorrow would have to take care of itself. The first week in the mountains nearly killed Elena. Every morning she woke with her back screaming in pain, her swollen belly making even the simplest movements agony. The cabin roof leaked when it rained. The walls had gaps where the wind howled through, stealing what little warmth she could generate from her small fire. And the work, the endless back-breaking work of survival, seemed impossible for a pregnant 18-year-old girl alone. But Elena refused to die, refused to give Don Ricardo and Donna Mercedes the satisfaction of being right about her fate. She started with the roof. Using fallen branches and what remained of the old timber, she climbed carefully, terrifyingly, onto the sagging structure and began patching holes. Her hands bled. Splinters drove deep into her palms. Twice she nearly fell, catching herself at the last moment, her heart hammering with the knowledge that a fall would kill not just her, but her baby. When the roof was barely functional, she turned to the walls. Mud and grass mixed together, packed into the gaps. It wasn't pretty, but it kept out some of the wind. She rehung the door using leather strips she'd made from a rabbit she'd managed to trap. Every small victory felt monumental. Food was the constant terror. The provisions Mercedes had given her ran out after 4 days. After that, Elena survived on what she could find. Wild berries, edible roots her mother had taught her to identify years ago, occasional fish from the stream, rabbits when she got lucky with her crude traps. But it wasn't enough. She was eating for 2, her body demanding nutrition she couldn't provide. She felt herself weakening daily. Her clothes hung loose everywhere except her belly. Her face grew gaunt, shadows forming under her eyes that spoke of exhaustion beyond sleep deprivation. Still she worked. She cleared a plot of land near the cabin and planted seeds she'd saved from the few vegetables Mercedes had given her. It was too late in the season. The garden would likely fail, but she had to try. Had to believe in some kind of future beyond the next meal, the next sunrise. What Elena didn't know was that she wasn't alone, that every day Dakota watched from the forest. He'd been tracking her since the day she arrived, torn between conflicting instincts. His tribe's territory had been violated by a white settler. Protocol demanded he either drive her out or report her presence to the council. But she was pregnant, alone, clearly dying by inches. What honor was there in hastening the death of someone already condemned? So Takoda watched, and the more he watched, the more he found himself moved. This girl, barely more than a child, displayed a courage that shamed most warriors he knew. She didn't cry, didn't give up. When exhaustion dropped her to her knees, she rested for 5 minutes, then stood and continued working. He'd seen warriors break under less hardship. He'd seen grown men surrender to despair with better resources than she had. But Elena Brennan kept fighting, kept building, kept surviving. Takoda found himself leaving things for her. A rabbit, already cleaned, hanging from a tree branch near her cabin. Firewood stacked neatly while she slept. Once, when he saw her struggling to reach berries on a high branch, he waited until she left, then picked them and left them in a basket by her door. Elena noticed, of course. At first she was terrified. Someone was watching her, helping her, and she didn't know if it was mercy or a game before the kill. But the gifts continued, always practical, never threatening. Slowly, her fear transformed into cautious gratitude. Someone, something wanted her to survive. She started leaving small offerings in return, a cloth she'd woven from plant fibers, a carving she'd made from wood during the long evenings when she was too exhausted to work but too anxious to sleep. They were poor gifts, but they were all she had. Takoda kept every single one. He didn't understand why this mattered so much to him. He had Kiona, beautiful, fierce Kiona, who had loved him since they were children. Their marriage had been arranged since they were 14. In 2 months they would be wed, and he would take his place as one of the tribe's lead warriors. Kiona would give him strong sons, would fight beside him, would be the perfect Apache wife. He should be thinking of her, not of this strange white girl who somehow made him feel protective in ways he couldn't explain. But he couldn't stop watching Elena, couldn't stop ensuring she had enough food, enough firewood, enough chance of survival to make it through another day. One afternoon in early October, Takoda was returning from a hunting trip when he saw Elena working on her garden. She was on her knees pulling weeds, her movements slow and pained. As he watched, she suddenly went very still. Her hand moved to her belly, and even from a distance, Takoda could see her face pale with fear. She tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't hold her. She collapsed back to her knees, then forward onto her hands, breathing in sharp gasps that carried across the clearing. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Takoda moved without thinking, stepping from the trees and crossing the clearing in long strides. Elena's head snapped up at the sound of his approach. Her eyes went wide with terror when she saw him, an Apache warrior, tall and armed, bearing down on her. "No!" she gasped, trying to crawl backward. "Please, no!" But then another wave of pain hit her. She cried out, doubling over, and Takoda saw blood on her dress. His heart seized with understanding. The baby. Something was wrong with the baby. He knelt beside her, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "I help," he said in broken English. "Not hurt. Help." Elena's eyes met his, green eyes full of pain and terror and desperate hope. She'd been alone so long, suffered so much, and now this stranger who'd been leaving her gifts was offering help when she needed it most desperately. "The baby," she whispered. "Something's wrong. Please, please help my baby." Takoda had helped birth foals, had watched the tribe's midwives work. He knew the basics of what needed to happen, and he knew that Elena needed shelter, warmth, skilled hands, things she didn't have alone in this ruined cabin. He should take her to his tribe. But his tribe would likely reject her, or worse. Some saw white settlers as enemies to be eliminated, not saved. If he brought her there now, he'd be starting a conflict he couldn't control. The decision made itself. Takoda scooped Elena into his arms. She was so light, dangerously light, and carried her into the cabin. He built up the fire, boiled water, prepared cloths, and then he did something that would change both their lives forever. He stayed. He sat with Elena through the afternoon and into the night as her body tried to expel the baby too early. He held her hand when the pain became unbearable. He whispered reassurances in Apache that she probably didn't understand, but seemed to find comfort in anyway. And when dawn broke and Elena was still alive, still pregnant, the crisis passed. Takoda knew he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He'd made a choice. He'd chosen this girl's life over his duty to his tribe, over his promise to Kiona, over everything he'd been raised to believe about where loyalties should lie. Elena fell asleep from sheer exhaustion, her hand still clutching his. Takoda sat there watching her breathe and wondered what he'd just done, and why, despite knowing he should leave, he couldn't bring himself to let go of her hand. For 3 days, Takoda stayed with Elena. He told himself he would leave once she was strong enough to survive alone. But each day revealed new reasons to stay just one more night. The first day she was too weak to stand. He brought her water, made broth from rabbit he'd caught, kept the fire going. She watched him with wary, grateful eyes, as if expecting him to vanish like a dream, or turn violent like a nightmare. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked on the second day, her voice hoarse from disuse. Takoda struggled with English words. "You fight," he said simply. "You not give up. This honored." Elena's eyes filled with tears. It was the first kind thing anyone had said to her in months. "I don't feel honored. I feel broken." Takoda shook his head firmly. Broken things that keep standing, stronger than things never broken. On the third day, Elena was strong enough to sit up to eat solid food. Takoda prepared to leave. He had to. Kiona would be looking for him by now. The hunting trip he'd claimed to be on shouldn't have taken this long. Questions would be asked. But as he moved toward the door, Elena's voice stopped him. "What's your name? I should know the name of the man who saved my life." "Takoda," he said. "Takoda," Elena repeated, the Apache word strange on her tongue. "I'm Elena Brennan, and I—" Her voice broke. "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to help me. Your people and mine, we're supposed to be enemies." "People say many things about who enemies are supposed to be," Takoda replied. "I think we choose. You never enemy to me." He left before she could respond, disappearing into the forest like smoke. But he didn't go far. He made camp a mile away, close enough to watch, far enough to maintain the illusion he'd left. When he finally returned to his tribe 4 days after he'd planned, Kiona was waiting at the edge of camp, her face dark with anger and something else. Suspicion. "Where were you?" she demanded. "A 2-day hunt took 6 days?" Kiona was beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, all power and intensity and danger. Her black hair fell to her waist, her dark eyes could pin a man in place, and she moved with the lethal grace of a warrior who'd proven herself in combat. She'd killed 2 enemy warriors in raids. She feared nothing, and she expected complete loyalty from the man promised to her. "Tracking took longer than expected," Takoda said evenly. It wasn't entirely a lie. "You're lying." Kiona stepped closer, studying his face. "I know you, Takoda. Since we were children, I know when you hide something. What are you hiding?" "Nothing that concerns you." "Wrong answer." Kiona's hand moved to her knife, not threatening but making a point. "Everything you do concerns me. In 2 months we marry. Your secrets become my secrets. Your honor becomes my honor. So tell me, what did you do on this hunting trip that you can't speak of?" Takoda met her eyes steadily. "I helped someone who needed help. That's all." "Who?" Kiona's eyes narrowed. "What person would need help that you can't speak of openly?" Then her expression changed, understanding dawning like a weapon being drawn. "A white settler. You helped a white settler." The accusation hung in the air. Other tribe members had stopped to listen, drawn by Kiona's raised voice. Takoda felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. "There is a girl," Takoda said carefully, "alone in the mountains, pregnant, dying. I gave her food. This is shameful. If she's a settler on our land—" "Yes," Kiona's voice rang with righteous anger. "How many of our people have settlers killed? How many times have they stolen our land, broken promises, destroyed our way of life? And you help one of them?" "She is not an army. She is not a threat. She is a girl, barely more than a child, who will die without help." Takoda's voice was calm but firm. We are not monsters who let pregnant children starve because of their skin color. Kiona turned to the gathered crowd. You all hear this? He admits helping a white settler, in our territory, during a time when their armies hunt us. What if she's a spy? What if she leads soldiers here? An older warrior, Nalnish, stepped forward. He was one of the tribal council members, and his word carried weight. Where is this girl now? In her cabin, alone, miles from here. She knows nothing of our camp. Takoda met Nalnish's eyes. She is no threat. Perhaps not now, Kiona interjected, but white settlers multiply like rabbits. 1 becomes 10. 10 becomes 100. We show mercy. They show invasion. She looked at Takoda with something like betrayal in her eyes. And you've been going to her, multiple times. I can see it in your face. This wasn't one act of mercy. This is ongoing. She wasn't wrong. Takoda had been back to check on Elena twice since he'd left, leaving firewood and game. He'd told himself he was simply ensuring his initial effort wasn't wasted. But standing here, seeing the hurt and anger in Kiona's eyes, he had to face a harder truth. He was drawn to Elena. Not just protective, drawn. There was something about her stubborn survival, her refusal to break despite having every reason to, that called to something deep in him. She reminded him of why he'd become a warrior in the first place, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. But that explanation would sound like an excuse, and worse, it would reveal feelings he wasn't ready to examine, let alone defend. I will not abandon someone in need, Takoda said quietly. This is not negotiable. Kiona's face went cold. Then you choose, her or me, your future with your people, with me, with the honor of our marriage, or that white girl dying in the mountains. Choose now, Takoda. It was an ultimatum meant to force compliance. Kiona expected him to back down, to promise he'd leave Elena to her fate. That was the reasonable choice, the loyal choice, the choice that protected his future. But standing there, Takoda remembered Elena's green eyes full of desperate hope, remembered her whisper, "Please help my baby." Remembered the way she'd kept building that cabin with bleeding hands, kept planting that doomed garden, kept fighting when any reasonable person would have given up. He couldn't abandon her, no matter what it cost him. I won't stop helping her, Takoda said, not until she and her child are safe. The silence that followed was devastating. Kiona's face went through a dozen motions, shock, hurt, rage, and finally cold hatred. Then we're done, she said flatly. You've chosen a white stranger over your people, over me, over everything. And when the council hears of this, they'll make you regret that choice. She turned and walked away, her back rigid with fury. The gathered tribe members dispersed, some shaking their heads, others whispering. Takoda stood alone in the center of camp, feeling the weight of what he'd just done. Nalnish approached, his weathered face unreadable. That was foolish, he said quietly. Kiona is not just your promised wife. She's the chief's niece. Refusing her, choosing a white girl over her, this will have consequences. I know, Takoda said. Do you? Nalnish studied him. This white girl. There's something more here, isn't there? This isn't just about mercy. Takoda wanted to deny it, but he'd never been good at lying to Nalnish, who'd trained him since childhood. I don't know what it is, he admitted, but I can't leave her to die, I won't. Nalnish sighed heavily. Then you'd better make sure she's worth it, because you've just started a war, and if Kiona decides to act on her anger... He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. As Takoda returned to his wiki-up that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was building. Kiona was proud, fierce, and not accustomed to rejection. She wouldn't let this insult stand. And Elena, alone in her cabin, had no idea that by surviving, by accepting help, she'd become the center of a storm that would soon break over all of them. 3 weeks passed. Autumn deepened toward winter, and Elena's belly grew heavier. The baby would come soon, within a month if her calculations were right. She lived in constant fear of going into labor alone, of something going wrong with no one to help. But she also lived in hope, because Takoda kept coming back. Not every day. Sometimes a week would pass with no sign of him except the gifts that appeared. firewood, meat. Once a beautiful blanket woven from rabbit fur that must have taken weeks to make. When he did visit, he stayed at a careful distance, helping with tasks too difficult for her, repairing the roof's highest points, hunting larger game, showing her which plants were safe to eat and which would make her sick. They didn't talk much. His English was limited, her Apache non-existent, but they communicated in other ways. Gestures, smiles, the comfortable silence of two people working side by side. Elena found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that should have alarmed her. He was promised to another woman. He was Apache, and she was white. Any future between them was impossible. But her heart didn't care about impossibility. When Takoda showed her how to set better rabbit traps, his hands guiding hers, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. When he laughed, a rare, beautiful sound, at her clumsy attempts to pronounce Apache words, something in her chest cracked open. She was falling for him, had probably been falling for him since he'd stayed with her through that terrifying night when she'd nearly lost the baby. What Elena didn't know was that Takoda was fighting the same battle. Every time he left her cabin, he swore it would be the last time. He would ensure she had enough supplies to survive until the baby came. Then he would leave her to her life while he returned to his. But then he'd find himself back at her clearing the next day, unable to stay away. Kiona noticed, of course. She watched Takoda like a hawk, tracking his absences, questioning his excuses. She'd stopped speaking to him directly, communicating only through cold glares and pointed comments to others when he could hear. The wedding preparations had halted. The tribe whispered. One evening Kiona called a meeting with several young warriors she'd trained with, men loyal to her who shared her views about white settlers. Takoda wasn't invited, but word reached him anyway. Nalnish came to his wiki-up, his face grave. "You need to know what Kiona is planning," the old warrior said. "I heard from the council. She's convinced others that your white girl is a threat. That she'll bring soldiers. That she's a disease that will spread. Kiona has permission to handle the situation." Takoda's blood ran cold. What does that mean? It means tomorrow at dawn, she and her warriors are riding to that cabin. They plan to burn it, with the girl inside if necessary. Nalnish gripped Takoda's shoulder. "They'll make it look like an accident, a fire that got out of control. No one will question it, and your white girl will be gone." Takoda was moving before Nalnish finished speaking, grabbing his weapons, his mind racing. He had to warn Elena, had to get her away from the cabin before Kiona arrived. But where could she go? She was 9 months pregnant, unable to travel far. And if he took her to another white settlement, she'd face the same rejection that had driven her to the mountains in the first place. He ran through the night, his feet finding the familiar path to Elena's cabin even in darkness. By the time he arrived, the first hints of dawn were lightening the eastern sky. Elena was awake. She slept poorly now, her belly too large for comfort. She was outside washing her face in the stream when she saw him. "Takoda?" She smiled, but it faded when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" "Danger," he said urgently. "Warriors come. They burn—" He gestured at the cabin, struggling for words. "You must go, now." Elena's face went pale. "I can't. I'm too pregnant to travel far. And where would I go?" Her hand went to her belly. "The baby could come any day." "Then we fight," Takoda said grimly. "Or we run. But you cannot stay here." Before Elena could respond, they heard it. The sound of horses, multiple riders approaching fast. Takoda's hand went to his knife. "Too late," he breathed. "They're here." 7 warriors rode into the clearing, Kiona at their head. She sat tall on her horse, a torch in one hand, her face cold and beautiful as carved stone. When she saw Takoda standing protectively in front of Elena's cabin, her expression twisted with rage and vindication. "So it's true," Kiona said in Apache. "You've been coming here, standing guard over this white invader like she's precious treasure." "Kiona, don't do this," Takoda replied in the same language. "She's done nothing to harm our people." "Her existence harms us," Kiona gestured with her torch. Every white settler on our land is a promise broken, a death delayed, an invasion beginning. And you've betrayed everything for her, your people, your promises. Me. Elena couldn't understand the words, but she understood the tone, the threat implied by the torch, the way the warriors had fanned out in a semicircle blocking any escape. She stepped forward, standing beside Takoda, despite his attempt to keep her behind him. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'm not your enemy, I'm just trying to survive. I'll leave as soon as my baby comes. I'll go somewhere else. Just please, don't do this." Kayona's eyes locked on Elena with pure hatred. "You don't even know what you've destroyed, do you? You don't know that he was mine, that he threw away his honor, his future, everything, for you, a white girl who'll die in these mountains anyway." She raised the torch. "But I'll make it faster for you, merciful, more merciful than you deserve." "No!" Takoda's roar shattered the dawn quiet. He launched himself at Kiona's horse, pulling her from the saddle before she could throw the torch. They hit the ground hard, Takoda pinning her wrists before she could reach her weapon. The other warriors moved immediately, surrounding them, weapons drawn. It was 7 against 1, suicide odds, even for a warrior as skilled as Takoda, but he didn't back down. "You want to burn her?" Takoda said, breathing hard. "You have to go through me first, and I will kill anyone who tries. Starting with you, Kiona. I don't want to, but I will." Kiona stared up at him with something like devastation in her eyes. "You would kill me? For her?" "I would die for her," Takoda said quietly, "and that means I would kill for her too. Even you." "I'm sorry, Kiona, but yes, even you." Something broke in Kiona's face, not just anger anymore, grief, real and raw. "Then you've already killed what we were, what we could have been." She stood slowly when Takoda released her, looked at the other warriors. "Lower your weapons, we're not fighting him. We're not martyring him over this nothing." She turned to Elena, switching to broken English. "You want him, you have him. And when winter kills you both, when your baby dies in the cold, when this choice destroys him, remember that I offered mercy, faster than what's coming." Kiona mounted her horse, looked at Takoda one last time. "You're exiled. Effective now. You cannot return to the tribe while I live. And if you do," her voice broke, "if you do, I'll kill you myself. Not for what you did to me, but for what you've become. A traitor." She rode away, the other warriors following after throwing looks of pity or disgust at Takoda. The clearing fell silent except for the sound of Elena's ragged breathing and Takoda's pounding heart. He'd done it. He'd chosen. And the cost was everything, his tribe, his honor, his future. All of it gone in one moment of defiance. Elena touched his arm gently. "What just happened? What did you lose for me?" Takoda looked at her, this girl who'd somehow become his entire world without him noticing. "Everything," he said simply, "but also nothing, because without you, nothing else matters." And despite the devastation of his exile, despite the impossibility of their situation, Takoda felt something unexpected. Peace. He'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, whatever hardships they faced, he'd chosen love over duty, protection over honor, and he wouldn't regret it. Winter came early that year, brutal and unforgiving. Takoda moved into Elena's cabin. Propriety was irrelevant now, and survival demanded they share resources. He hunted daily, storing meat for the harsh months ahead. Elena, now hugely pregnant, did what work she could, sewing warmer clothes from animal hides Takoda brought, drying herbs, preparing for the baby's arrival. They didn't speak much about what had happened, the exile, the sacrifice. It was too large, too raw. Instead, they focused on immediate things. Is there enough firewood? Should we smoke more meat? Will the roof hold under heavy snow? But at night, sitting by the fire, Elena would watch Takoda and feel overwhelming guilt mixed with overwhelming gratitude. He'd given up everything for her. His tribe, his promised wife, his entire life. And she was just a pregnant girl he barely knew. "Why?" she asked one night, unable to hold the question any longer. "Why did you sacrifice everything for me?" Takoda was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "You know the night I stayed with you, when baby almost came too early?" Elena nodded. "That night I see something, I see you fight for life when dying was easier. I see you care more about baby than yourself. I see—" He struggled for words. "I see someone worth saving, someone who never give up." He looked at her. That kind of person, that kind of strength, worth everything. "But you loved Kiona," Elena whispered. "You were going to marry her." "I honored Kiona," Dakota corrected. "Not same as love. Love is this." He gestured between them. "Choosing person even when it costs everything, even when it makes no sense, even when—" He was interrupted by Elena's sharp gasp. Her hand flew to her belly, her face going white. "Dakota, I think it's time." The baby came that night, arriving in the middle of a snowstorm, as if determined to make her entrance as dramatic as possible. Elena labored for 14 hours, screaming, crying, gripping Dakota's hand so hard she left bruises. Dakota stayed with her through all of it, murmuring encouragement, bringing water, doing his best to remember what he'd seen the tribe's midwives do. When the baby finally arrived, a girl tiny but healthy with a powerful cry that filled the cabin, Elena sobbed with relief and joy. Dakota cut the cord, cleaned the baby, wrapped her in the softest rabbit fur, and placed her in Elena's arms. "She's perfect," Elena breathed, staring at her daughter with wonder. "She's absolutely perfect." The baby had dark hair, would probably have Don Ricardo's coloring. But Elena looked at her and saw only innocence, only hope, only love. This baby wasn't responsible for how she'd been conceived. She was just a child who deserved love and protection. "What you name her?" Dakota asked softly. Elena thought for a moment. "Hope," she said finally. "Hope, Brennan, because you gave me hope when I had none. Because she represents a future I didn't think I'd have." Over the following weeks, as Elena recovered and hope grew stronger, something shifted between Elena and Dakota. The crisis was past, the immediate danger had faded, and now they had to face what they'd become to each other. Dakota adored Hope from the first moment. He carved toys for her, sang Apache lullabies when she cried, walked her around the cabin for hours when she was fussy. Watching him with her daughter, Eleanor felt her heart crack open completely. This man who'd lost everything had gained a family he hadn't asked for and loved them without reservation. One evening, with Hope sleeping peacefully in her basket, Eleanor finally found the courage to speak the truth. "I love you," she said simply. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first night you stayed. Maybe when you faced down 7 warriors for me. But I love you, Dakota, and I know that complicates everything." He kissed her, gentle, careful, as if she were something precious that might break. When he pulled back, his eyes were shining. "I love you too, since I see you in garden, fighting to live, since I see you refuse to break. You are strongest person I ever know." They married the next spring in a ceremony that combined what they could remember of Apache traditions with Elena's Christian faith. No priest, no tribal blessing, just the two of them and baby Hope, speaking vows under the mountain sky and meaning every word. Life was hard but good. Elena's garden thrived in the spring. Dakota's hunting provided plenty. Hope grew strong and healthy. They existed in their own small world, separate from both Apache and white communities, and it was enough. Until the day the child disappeared. It happened in late summer. A boy from Dakota's former tribe, 6 years old, curious and adventurous, had wandered too far from camp and gotten lost in the forest. The tribe searched for 2 days, finding nothing. The boy's mother was hysterical. The father, grim-faced, and even Kiona, who'd led most of the search parties, was showing signs of desperation. Elena heard about it from a traveling trader who stopped at their cabin. The man was surprised to find a white woman living with an Apache, but trade was trade, and he shared news freely. "They're saying the boy is probably dead by now," the trader said. "Been gone 3 days. These mountains at that age, and terrible thing." Eleanor felt something twist in her chest. She thought of Hope, sleeping peacefully in the cabin, thought of how she would feel if her daughter was lost and alone in the wilderness, thought of that mother's grief. "I know where he might be," she said suddenly. "There's a cave system about 5 miles north of here, deep, easy to get lost in. If he was running from something, if he was scared, he might have hidden there." Dakota looked at her. That's in tribe territory. If we go, they see us. A child is missing, Elena said firmly. Nothing else matters. We have to try. They left Hope with the trader's wife and headed into the forest. The cave system was extensive, dangerous, with passages that went deep into the mountain. They searched for hours, calling the boy's name, leaving markers so they wouldn't get lost themselves. It was Elena who finally heard it, a faint whimpering from deep in one of the passages. They found the boy huddled in a small chamber, terrified, thirsty, but alive. His leg was injured, looked like a fall, but he was conscious and coherent. "We've got you," Elena said gently, even though the boy probably didn't understand English. "You're safe now." As they carried the boy out of the cave, they emerged directly in front of a search party from the tribe. Kiona was at the head, and she froze when she saw them. Dakota, the exile, and Elena, the white girl carrying the missing child. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the boy's mother pushed forward with a cry of relief and joy, taking her son from Elena's arms and sobbing into his hair. The boy was talking rapidly in Apache, pointing at Elena and Dakota, clearly explaining how they'd found him and saved him. The tribe's medicine man examined the boy and declared he would be fine, bruised and scared but unharmed. And then, slowly, the tribe members began approaching Elena and Dakota, not with hostility, with something else. Gratitude. The boy's father clasped Dakota's arm. "You saved my son. Thank you, brother." An elder woman touched Elena's hand. "You knew where to look when we did not. The spirits guided you to him." Even some who had ridden with Kiona that day to burn Elena's cabin looked ashamed now, unable to meet her eyes. They'd wanted to kill this woman, and she'd just saved one of their children. Kiona stood apart, watching this transformation with an expression Elena couldn't read. When their eyes met, something passed between them. Not friendship, but acknowledgement, an understanding. Finally, the tribal chief, an old man named Nalnish, approached. "You saved one of ours when you had every reason to let him die, when we exiled Dakota. When my niece led warriors to burn your home, you showed mercy we did not deserve." "I couldn't let a child die," Elena said simply. "No matter whose child he was." Nalnish studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Dakota. "The exile is lifted. You may return to the tribe if you wish. Both of you. The white woman who saved our child is welcome here." It should have been a triumphant moment, a vindication. But as Elena watched the tribe celebrate the boy's rescue, watched the mother crying with relief, she felt only sadness. Not for herself, but for how much pain could have been avoided if they'd chosen understanding over fear from the beginning. Kiona approached last. Her face was carefully neutral, but Elena could see the struggle beneath. Pride warring with remorse, anger competing with grudging respect. "You saved him," Kiona said flatly. "I'm a mother," Elena replied. "I understand that kind of fear." Kiona looked at Hope, nestled in Dakota's arms. Something flickered in her eyes. Pain maybe, or regret for the children she would never have with him. "I was wrong about you," she said finally, the words clearly difficult. "Not about everything, but about some things. You're not weak. You're not a coward. And you're not a threat." "Thank you," Elena said quietly. Kiona's eyes moved to Dakota. "I wanted to punish you, for choosing her, for rejecting me, for making me feel—" She paused, struggling. "For making me feel like I wasn't enough." "Kiona," Dakota started, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. I asked the council for permission to exile you. Not just you, her too. I wanted her driven into the wilderness to die. I wanted—" Kiona's voice cracked slightly. "I wanted her to suffer the way I was suffering." The admission hung in the air, raw and honest. Elena felt a strange compassion for this woman who had tried to kill her. She understood that kind of pain, the agony of rejection, of feeling worthless, of watching someone choose another over you. "The council agreed," Kiona continued. "They voted. Your exile was to be permanent. Elena was to be driven from these mountains or killed if she resisted. And I—" She took a shaky breath. "I was glad. I wanted revenge more than I wanted justice." "But," Elena prompted gently, But you saved our child anyway. Knowing what I'd done, knowing what I'd tried to do, you saved him. Kiona's proud face showed something that might have been shame. That is the mark of a true warrior. Not strength or skill with weapons, but choosing mercy when vengeance would be easier. She turned to the assembled tribe. I was wrong, she said loudly in Apache, then repeated in halting English for Elena's benefit. I called for this woman's death. I said she was dangerous, that she would bring soldiers, that she was disease, but she brought only kindness. While I sought to burn her home, she sought to save our children. The council should know. I no longer oppose her presence. I no longer oppose Takoda's choice. It was the closest thing to an apology Kiona could give. Public, formal, binding. By Apache custom once spoken before the tribe, such words couldn't be taken back. Naalnish nodded gravely. The council hears Kiona's words. The exile is not only lifted, it is erased. Takoda is restored with full honors. Elena is adopted as a sister of the tribe. Their daughter Hope is one of us. But Elena surprised everyone with what she said next. Chief Naalnish, may I speak? Speak, daughter. Kiona acted from pain, not evil. She felt betrayed by someone she loved. She made mistakes, but... Elena looked at Kiona directly. I've made mistakes too. Terrible ones. I know what it's like to feel broken, to act from a place of hurt. If the council is considering punishment for Kiona, I ask that you show mercy, as she's now shown to me. The tribe murmured in surprise. Naalnish's eyes widened slightly. You would defend the woman who tried to kill you. I would defend the woman who admitted she was wrong, who chose honesty over pride. That takes more courage than violence ever could. Kiona stared at Elena with an expression of complete shock. No one spoke. The mountain wind rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of coming autumn. Baby Hope made a small sound in Takoda's arms, breaking the silence. Finally, Kiona spoke, her voice thick with emotion. Why? Why defend me? I deserve punishment. Because mercy has to start somewhere, Elena said simply. Someone has to choose forgiveness over revenge. Otherwise, the cycle never ends. Your people hurt mine. Mine hurt yours. Back and forth forever. Unless someone says enough. She moved closer to Kiona. You tried to burn my cabin because you were hurt. My godfather hurt me because of his own darkness. His wife threw me out because she was afraid. If I seek revenge on them, and they retaliate, and it continues... Elena shook her head. I refuse. I choose forgiveness. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to become like those who hurt me. Something broke in Kiona's face. She, who never cried, who prided herself on stoic warrior strength, had tears streaming down her cheeks. You shame me, she whispered. Your mercy shames my cruelty. No, Elena said firmly. Your honesty honors my mercy. You could have stayed silent, let others take blame, protected your pride. Instead, you spoke truth even when it hurt you. That's real strength. Naalnish watched this exchange with deep interest. The white girl teaches us lessons we should have known. Mercy breeds mercy. Honesty breeds honor. Courage takes many forms. He looked at his tribe. We will speak no more of punishment for Kiona. Her confession and reform are enough. But we will remember this day, the day a white woman we tried to kill taught us what it means to be truly strong. The tribal gathering began to disperse, but several members approached Elena to thank her, to touch Hope's small hand, to offer gifts of welcome. Elena was overwhelmed by the sudden acceptance, the warmth after so much cold rejection. As evening fell and they prepared to return to the cabin, Kiona stopped them one more time. I want you to know, she said to Takoda, I loved you, truly loved you, and it hurt to lose you. I know, Takoda said gently, and I'm sorry I hurt you. You deserved honesty sooner. You gave me honesty when it mattered, Kiona replied. She looked at Elena. You chose well, Kiona struggled for the right words. She's better than I would have been. For you, for the man you wanted to become. It was a gift, that acknowledgement, a final letting go. Kiona turned and walked away, her back straight, her head high. Wounded, but not broken. Changed, but not destroyed. Will she be all right? Elena asked, watching her go. Eventually, Takoda said. Kiona is strong. She will hurt, and then she will heal, and then she will find someone worthy of her. Someone who chooses her first, the way I chose you. They walked back to the cabin as twilight deepened, Hope sleeping peacefully between them, and Elena felt for the first time since her nightmare began that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. She was wrong. There was one more confrontation coming, one more piece of the past that needed resolution. And it would arrive in the form of a letter, carried by a traveling priest, that would tear open old wounds and demand she face the man who destroyed her innocence. But tonight, she didn't know that yet. Tonight, she simply held her daughter, walked beside the man who'd become her angel, and let herself believe in happy endings. The letter arrived in early winter, carried by Father Dominic, a traveling priest who ministered to scattered settlements and sometimes to Apache camps when they allowed it. He was an old man, kind-faced, who'd heard about the white girl living with Apaches, and wanted to ensure she hadn't been taken against her will. When he found Elena, healthy, clearly loved, with a baby and a husband who looked at her like she hung the moon, his concern transformed into relief and curiosity. "I'm glad to see you're well, my child," Father Dominic said. "The stories I'd heard, well, they didn't match this reality." "Stories are rarely true," Elena said, serving him coffee. "What brings you to these mountains, Father?" "Several things, but one concerns you directly." He pulled a worn envelope from his satchel. "This letter. It's from Don Ricardo Salazar's parents, your godfather's parents. They asked me to find you if you still lived. They said it was urgent." Elena's hand trembled as she took the envelope. She hadn't heard that name in over a year, had tried to bury everything associated with it. How did they know to look for me? Apparently, young Miguel, Don Ricardo's youngest son, ran away from home 6 months ago. He went to his grandparents and told them everything. About what Don Ricardo did to you. About how Donna Mercedes threw you out. About the lies they told. Father Dominic's face was grave. The grandparents were horrified, my child. Absolutely horrified. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Miguel. Sweet, innocent Miguel who'd cried when she left. He'd been brave enough to tell the truth when no one else would. With shaking hands, she opened the letter. Takoda moved to stand behind her, his hand on her shoulder, a silent support. She read aloud, translating the Spanish for his benefit. "Dearest Elena, we write this letter with hearts full of shame and sorrow. Miguel came to us 6 months past and revealed truths we should have seen ourselves. Our son Ricardo is a monster who wore the mask of righteousness. You were an innocent child placed in our care, and we failed you catastrophically." When Miguel told us what Ricardo had done, the abuse, the violations, the cruelty, we confronted him. He denied everything at first, but when we threatened to involve the authorities, when we showed him that we believed Miguel over him, he confessed, without remorse, without shame. He said you tempted him, that you wanted it. The words of a coward. We have taken the following actions. Ricardo has been completely disowned. He receives nothing from our estate, not a single coin. The property that was your parents' cabin and land, it legally belongs to you. We have the deed. It is yours, free and clear. We have established a trust for your child. 1/3 of our estate will go to her when she reaches maturity. This is not charity. It is justice. Ricardo's crime created her. Our wealth will ensure she never suffers for his sins. The remainder of our estate will be divided among our other grandchildren, with specific provisions that Ricardo can never access any of it. We have reported Ricardo's crimes to the territorial authorities. He currently faces charges of assault and abuse of a minor. Donna Mercedes faces charges of criminal neglect for throwing you out while pregnant. Ricardo has been formally excommunicated from the church. Father Dominic personally brought charges before the bishop. In our Christian community, he is now persona non grata, unwelcome in any home, any business, any gathering. We know these actions cannot undo the harm done to you, cannot restore your innocence or erase your suffering. But we hope they provide some measure of justice. If you are alive and receive this letter, please know, you were never the problem. You were an innocent child betrayed by those who should have protected you. We are so deeply sorry. And if you can find it in your heart, we would very much like to meet our great-granddaughter. with profound regret and love, Don Alejandro and Doña Isabella Salazar. By the time Elena finished reading, she was sobbing. Takoda held her as she cried, not tears of pain this time, but of release, of validation, of finally being believed. "They believed me," she whispered. "Someone finally believed me." Father Dominic cleared his throat gently. "There's more, my child. Don Ricardo's situation is dire. He's lost everything. His wife divorced him, very rare, but the church granted it given the circumstances. His children want nothing to do with him. He's been forced to leave the territory. Last I heard, he was living in a mining camp, working for pennies, drinking away what little he earns. He's become everything he once pretended to despise." Eleanor tried to feel satisfaction at this news, tried to feel that justice had been served, but mostly she just felt tired. "I don't want to see him," she said. "I don't need his apology or his excuses. He's already taken enough from my life." "I understand completely," Father Dominic said. "But his parents, they're different. They genuinely want to make amends. They've asked if you would consider visiting them, or if they could visit you. They want to know their great-granddaughter." Eleanor looked at Takoda. "What do you think?" "They tried to make right the wrongs," Takoda said carefully. "Gave you justice, gave hope future. That is honorable, but only you can decide if you want them in your life." Eleanor thought about it. These were not the people who'd hurt her. They were elderly grandparents who'd been deceived by their son and who'd taken decisive action once they learned the truth. They'd given her property, money, justice, but more than that, they'd believed her. They'd publicly declared her innocence. "Tell them," Eleanor said to Father Dominic, "that they may visit in the spring, when the weather is better and the journey safer. I can't promise forgiveness. I'm still learning how to do that for myself, but I can promise I'll hear what they have to say." Father Dominic smiled. "That's more than fair, my child. I'll convey your message." He prepared to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Miguel wants you to know he's sorry for not speaking up sooner, for not being brave enough to defend you when it mattered. He was 12 years old," Elena said firmly. "Tell him he has nothing to apologize for. Tell him he's the bravest person in that whole family. And tell him," her voice caught, "tell him I love him. He'll always be my little brother." After Father Dominic left, Elena sat with the letter for a long time, rereading it, letting the words sink in. Justice, validation, restitution, things she'd never expected to receive. "How do you feel?" Takoda asked gently. "Strange," Elena admitted. "For so long I carried this belief that I was worthless, that everything that happened was my fault, that I deserved to be thrown away. And now," she gestured at the letter, "now people are saying I didn't deserve it, that I was innocent, that I'm worth defending." "You always were," Takoda said, "long before letter said so." "I know, but—" Eleanor struggled to articulate it. "Believing it in your heart is different from having the world acknowledge it. Having Ricardo's own parents call him a monster, having the church excommunicate him, having him face legal consequences. It's like the universe is finally agreeing with what you've been telling me all along." She looked at Takoda, this man who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself. "You were my angel when I needed one most. Before any letter, before any justice, before anyone else believed me, you did. You saw me, you saved me." "No," Takoda said, pulling her close. "You saved yourself. You survived. You kept fighting. You built life from nothing. He searched for words. "I just made sure you didn't have to fight alone anymore." That night, as they lay together with Hope sleeping peacefully in her cradle, Eleanor felt something shift inside her. The shame that had lived in her chest like a stone for so long began to dissolve. She'd been carrying Don Ricardo's guilt, bearing the weight of his sins, believing his lies about her worthlessness. But she wasn't worthless. She never had been. And now, finally, she could begin to believe it. Spring came, and with it, Don Alejandro and Doña Isabella Salazar. They were elderly, frail from the journey, but determined. When they saw Elena, healthy, strong, with a beautiful baby and a devoted husband, Doña Isabella wept. "I'm so sorry," the old woman said, holding Elena's hands. "So deeply sorry for what our son did, for what we didn't see, for failing you so completely." Elena had prepared herself to be cold, distant, but looking at this grandmother's genuine anguish, she found she couldn't hold on to anger. "You didn't know," she said quietly, "and when you found out, you made it right. That matters." They spent 3 days together. The Salazars fell in love with Hope, holding her tenderly and promising her a future of education and opportunities. They met Takoda, and after initial awkwardness came to respect him deeply. "You gave our granddaughter everything we should have given her," Don Alejandro said to Takoda. "Protection, love, dignity. We are in your debt." "I gave her what any person deserves," Takoda replied simply. "Nothing more." Before they left, Doña Isabella took Elena aside. "I brought you something." She handed Elena a small wooden box. Inside was jewelry, her mother's jewelry, the pieces Elena thought she'd lost forever. "Ricardo sold most of your parents' belongings after they died," Isabella explained. "But I found these in his house when we were removing his possessions. They were your mother's, they should be yours." Elena held her mother's locket, the one she'd worn every day before her parents died. Inside were tiny portraits of her mother and father, young and smiling. She'd forgotten what her mother's smile looked like. Now, seeing it again, she felt a connection to the past that wasn't just pain. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me back this piece of them." As the Salazars departed, Elena felt a chapter of her life closing. The trauma would never fully disappear. She knew that. She'd always carry scars from what Don Ricardo had done, from the months of suffering and rejection. But those scars were part of her story now, not the whole story. Her story also included Takoda's unwavering love, Hope's perfect innocence, the tribe's acceptance, the justice that had finally come, the forgiveness she'd chosen to give, and the future they were building together, not in spite of the past, but incorporating it, learning from it, letting it make them stronger rather than letting it break them. "Ready to go home?" Takoda asked, Hope in his arms. Elena looked at the cabin in the distance, the cabin she'd rebuilt with bleeding hands, where she'd given birth, where she'd learned what love truly meant. Home. Yes, it was home. Not because of the building, but because of the family inside it. 5 years later, Elena stood in the doorway of the cabin, now expanded, improved, truly solid, watching Hope play with 2 younger siblings. The garden flourished. The tribe visited regularly. The Salazars sent letters and gifts, maintaining a relationship built on genuine love and repentance. Don Ricardo had died 2 years prior in a mining accident, drunk and alone. When Elena heard, she felt nothing but sadness, not for him, but for the person he could have been if he'd chosen differently. She'd long since forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because she refused to carry his poison any longer. She was abandoned pregnant and built her cabin alone until the Apache became her angel and did what no one dared. He chose her when the world said she was worthless, and together they proved that real love doesn't rescue you from your story. It helps you rewrite it. Tell me, have you ever been saved by someone who had every reason to walk away but chose to stay? Have you ever been the angel for someone else? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and share this story with someone who needs to remember that their worst moment does not define them. Their choice to rise does.